When people think about shopping online, they usually focus on the obvious steps like picking items, paying, and waiting for delivery, but the privacy story of e-commerce is happening the whole time in the background. Checkout is where a business collects some of the most sensitive and identity-rich information it will ever touch, because it often includes names, addresses, contact details, payment information, and behavioral signals that can reveal preferences and patterns. Loyalty programs add another layer by encouraging repeat purchases, tracking habits over long periods, and linking activity across devices or even across physical and digital channels. For brand new learners, the tricky part is that a checkout flow and a loyalty program can feel normal and harmless because they are familiar, yet the data they generate can be used in ways that people do not expect or cannot easily see. Privacy risk in this space is not only about hackers stealing payment details, although that matters, but also about quiet overcollection, unclear purposes, and data that spreads to vendors and analytics systems without clear limits. The goal in this lesson is to learn how to assess the privacy risks that show up in checkout and loyalty, and to see how small design choices can change the risk profile dramatically. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good assessment begins by separating two ideas that often get blended together. What is necessary to complete a purchase and what is merely convenient or profitable for the business. To process an online order, a seller may need enough information to deliver a product and handle payment authorization, plus an email address for receipts and updates. That core need is usually narrow and straightforward, especially for a simple one-time purchase. The risk grows when the checkout flow becomes a data collection moment for additional purposes, like marketing, profiling, identity verification beyond what is needed, or building long-term behavioral records. Beginners often assume that if a field is on a checkout page, it must be required, but many fields are there because they are useful, not because they are essential. Even optional fields can be risky if the design nudges people to provide them or if the consequences of skipping them are unclear. A privacy assessment asks whether each piece of data supports the transaction directly, and if not, whether the extra purpose is clearly explained and meaningfully optional. Checkout privacy risk is also shaped by how identity is handled, because e-commerce systems frequently push users toward creating accounts. Accounts can be helpful for order history, returns, and save preferences, but they also create long-lived identifiers that enable long-term tracking. A guest checkout option can reduce risk for users who want a one-time purchase without a persistent relationship, but businesses sometimes make guest checkout hard to find or inconvenient. When accounts are required, you should assess what data is tied to the account and how easily a user can manage it. Another identity question is whether the same account is used across multiple brands or services under a parent company, because that expands linkability and can create surprises. Assessing privacy here means understanding whether identity is being created for user benefit, for business benefit, or both, and whether the user can realistically choose a lower tracking path. If account creation is used to quietly increase data collection, the privacy risk rises even if the shopping experience feels smooth. Payment information is a special case because it is both sensitive and heavily regulated in many environments, yet privacy risk still extends beyond the card number itself. Many systems use third parties to process payments, which can reduce direct exposure for the seller but increases the importance of vendor risk management. Payment processing can also introduce new identifiers like tokens, device fingerprints, or risk scores used to detect fraud. Those fraud controls can be legitimate and necessary, but they can also become opaque systems that make decisions about users without clear transparency. Another common misconception is that payment privacy risk ends when the transaction is approved, but in practice systems keep logs, receipts, and event records that can include partial payment details, billing addresses, and timestamps. If those records flow into analytics or support tools, the exposure widens. A strong assessment looks at what is stored, where it is stored, who can access it, and how long it remains, not just at whether the payment is encrypted in transit. Address and delivery data creates a different kind of risk because it ties online behavior to a physical location, which can raise personal safety concerns for some people. Shipping addresses are necessary for delivery, but the way they are stored and reused matters, especially when addresses are saved by default for future purchases. Billing addresses can also be collected even when they are not strictly needed, depending on payment method, which is another form of overcollection. Delivery data can include more than an address, such as delivery instructions, access codes, and times when someone is likely to be home, which can be sensitive in real-world terms. It can also include tracking numbers and carrier details that can reveal the movement of goods, and sometimes the nature of a purchase can be inferred from packaging, carrier communications, or product descriptions. Privacy assessment should consider whether these details are requested only when needed and whether the user is clearly informed about how long the information will be kept. It should also consider whether address data is shared with multiple parties like fulfillment partners, couriers, and customer support providers, because each handoff increases the number of places the data exists. Behavioral tracking inside checkout is often overlooked by beginners because it does not look like personal data at first glance. Many e-commerce sites log events such as items added to cart, time spent on pages, coupon usage, abandonment, and even typing behavior in forms. These events can be used to improve usability and reduce errors, which can be beneficial, but they can also be used to build profiles that predict spending habits, sensitivity to price, or likelihood to respond to marketing. When tracking is too granular, it can reveal personal circumstances, such as purchasing health-related items, religious items, or products tied to personal identity. Another risk is that event data is often sent to analytics providers in near real time, which can create sharing risk that users do not anticipate. A meaningful assessment asks what events are collected, whether any event payloads include identifiers or sensitive product details, and whether users are given transparent choices. The key is to distinguish between measurement that supports a clear operational purpose and tracking that exists mainly because it can. Discounts, coupons, and personalization are also privacy-sensitive because they often rely on linking behavior to identity and sometimes to third-party data. A coupon might look like a harmless code, but it can function as a tracking mechanism if it is personalized or tied to a specific campaign. Personalization can involve making predictions about users, such as what products they might want, what price might work, or what messaging will be persuasive. Those predictions might be built from the user's own shopping history, but they can also be enhanced with external data sources, which increases risk and reduces user understanding. Another subtle risk is fairness, where two people may be treated differently based on inferred traits, even if those traits are not explicitly collected. A privacy assessment should ask whether personalization is optional, whether it is explained in a way users can understand, and whether sensitive categories are involved. It should also consider whether personalization data is used beyond the shopping context, such as across unrelated services or for targeted advertising. Loyalty programs deserve special attention because they are designed to create persistent relationships and long-term data. A loyalty program often involves a member ID, points, tiers, purchase history, and communications preferences, which together can become a detailed record of someone's habits. Even when individual purchases are not sensitive, a long history can reveal patterns that are personal, such as routine purchases that indicate family size, health needs, travel habits, or financial constraints. Loyalty programs also commonly connect online and offline activity, such as scanning a code in a store, using a phone number at checkout, or linking a payment method for convenience. That cross-channel linking can be convenient, but it increases the privacy impact because it reduces separation between contexts. Another risk is that loyalty data may be shared with partners for co-branded offers or analytics, which can widen exposure. Assessing loyalty privacy means treating it as a long-term surveillance system by design, then asking what controls prevent it from becoming more invasive than users expect. One common misconception is that loyalty programs are harmless because membership is voluntary, but voluntary does not automatically mean informed or fair. People may feel pressured to join because prices or benefits differ significantly between members and non-members, which can turn choice into a kind of economic coercion. People may also not realize how much data is generated and retained, especially if the program includes app-based tracking, location features, or personalized offers based on behavior. Another misconception is that the only risk is marketing spam, when in reality the larger risk is the creation of a persistent identity and behavioral profile. Loyalty programs can also become targets for account takeover, because points and stored payment methods can have real value to attackers. A privacy assessment should consider both privacy and security implications, since loyalty accounts often combine identity, contact details, purchase history, and sometimes saved payment or address information. When voluntary participation hides complex tracking, the assessment should treat transparency as a key control. Transparency and choice are central to assessing checkout and loyalty privacy because they connect the technical system to user expectations. Transparency is not just a long policy document that few people read, but clear explanations at the moment people make decisions, like when they enter data or opt into a program. Choice should be meaningful, which means people can decline non-essential collection without losing the ability to purchase or being punished with confusing barriers. For example, if marketing opt-in is presented as pre-selected, that choice may not be meaningful in practice, even if it is technically optional. For loyalty programs, meaningful choice includes the ability to see and manage stored data, adjust communications, and leave the program with reasonable deletion or deactivation outcomes. Beginners sometimes treat transparency as a legal requirement, but it is also a risk control because confusion and surprise are major drivers of complaints and trust loss. A strong assessment looks at how the system communicates, not just what it collects. Another important risk area is third-party sharing, because e-commerce systems often rely on a network of providers that touch customer data. Checkout may involve payment processors, fraud detection services, shipping carriers, address validation tools, tax calculation services, analytics platforms, marketing automation providers, and customer support systems. Each provider can receive some portion of the data, and the combination can be more revealing than any single share. The assessment should map which provider receives what, for what purpose, and whether the sharing is necessary, minimized, and governed by strong contractual restrictions. It should also consider whether any provider uses the data for their own purposes, such as training models, improving unrelated products, or building cross-customer datasets. Another key point is whether providers use subprocessors, because data can travel further downstream than the primary relationship suggests. Beginners may assume the business is the only party processing their information, but in e-commerce, the ecosystem often processes the data as much as the storefront itself. Privacy risk increases with every extra hop unless controls reduce exposure and restrict secondary use. Retention and deletion are also a major part of assessing checkout and loyalty systems because the privacy impact accumulates over time. Some records must be retained for legitimate reasons like accounting, chargebacks, or legal obligations, but that does not mean every dataset should be kept forever. Checkout event logs, analytics data, abandoned carts, and personalization profiles often persist long after they are useful, mainly because deletion is hard and nobody feels the immediate cost. Loyalty purchase histories can accumulate for years, and even if the user stops participating, the data may remain in archives, backups, or vendor systems. A strong assessment asks what retention periods exist for each type of data, how deletion is enforced across systems, and whether there are clear processes for handling user requests related to access or deletion. It also considers what happens when accounts are dormant, because dormant accounts are often forgotten but still valuable targets for attackers. Retention is a privacy risk multiplier, and reducing it is often one of the most effective controls. To assess risks well, you also need to think about user groups and contexts, because e-commerce serves many people with different vulnerabilities. Children and teens may interact with loyalty programs through gaming-related purchases or family accounts, and their data can be more sensitive due to age and reduced ability to understand trade-offs. People in shared households may share devices, emails, or shipping addresses, which can cause privacy issues when purchase history is exposed to other family members. People buying sensitive items may face real harm if purchase details are revealed through email notifications, shared accounts, or package tracking. People with limited financial flexibility may feel pressure to join loyalty programs for discounts even if they would prefer not to be tracked. A solid assessment asks how the system behaves in these common real-world situations, not just in the ideal case of a single adult on a private device. Privacy risk is often about ordinary life, not rare edge cases. When you bring all of this together, assessing e-commerce checkout and loyalty privacy risks becomes a disciplined way of asking whether data processing is proportionate, understandable, and controlled. You begin by identifying what is necessary for the transaction and separating it from optional collection and secondary purposes. You examine identity creation, account design, and guest options to see how persistent tracking is encouraged or avoided. You evaluate payment, fraud, and shipping flows to understand what sensitive data is created and where it travels, including vendors and downstream systems. You look at behavioral tracking, personalization, and loyalty design as long-term profiling systems and ask whether transparency, choice, and minimization controls are real, not just theoretical. You examine retention and deletion because long-lived data creates long-lived risk. If you can describe the data flow clearly, justify each data element, limit sharing, provide meaningful choices, and bound retention, you can support commerce without turning routine shopping into an invisible surveillance engine.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.